Kashmir, popularly described as a paradise on earth. A landscape which has seen a change over the decades. A hostile terrain studded with some natural jewels. What stays hidden in the cliffs of the Pir Panjal range is the charismatic Markhor, a species that has been living on the edge due to poaching, bilateral conflict, and habitat loss. This is the story of the world's largest goat, which has a hope for survival in a paradise. This is Kashmir. We are walking the wild in India's remote northern frontier. Leading us is Dr. Riaz Ahmed from the Wildlife Trust of India. Nothing stops Dr. Riaz and his team, be it the weather or the hostile terrain. Every sign and evidence leads them closer to their subject of study and conservation. Dr. Riaz has spent the last 15 years in this harsh landscape studying enigmatic species. Accompanying him is Vivek Menon, Chief of Wildlife Trust of India, who's been part of conceptualizing the project and leading the team from the front. Here is the world's largest goat, the Pir Panjal Markhor, with its towering corkscrew horns. And to tell us more, we have Vivek, who is also the author of the Book of Indian Mammals, a go-to field guide for Indian mammal species.
The Markhor is an iconic species of the Pir Panjal. When I was researching for my book on Indian mammals, there was no decent photograph of the Markhor in India. And while leafing through the mammals of Pakistan, I found that they mentioned that this is extinct on the Indian side of the border. And I knew this was not true. I knew that there were shikar records of the Markhor, and I knew there were more recent work. The Wildlife Trust of India then started a project on the conservation of the Markhor and took on Riaz Ahmed, who has since done his doctorate on the Markhor. And we know now many interesting facets of behavior, apart from the headbutting of these magnificent goats, the world's largest goats that survive in the Pir Panjal mountains.
Markhor are known because of their majestic corkscrew horns. Typically, males are divided in 4 classes depending on the size of their horns. Class 1 males are around 2.5 years of age with small horns. As they mature to being Class 2 males, the ruff starts to grow along with their horns. By the age of 4.5, males enter the Class 3 stage with a prominent beard and 50 to 55 centimeter horns. As they enter into the classic stage of being Class 4 males, they start looking grand with their 75 centimeter horns, voluminous ruff, and the big coppery beard.
Studying an animal and making a conservation plan based on science is key to species recovery, and Wildlife Trust of India has been leading this part of the work. However, much of the species' well-being depends on governmental protection. And the Department of Wildlife Protection has been at the forefront of conservation in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. We spoke with the wardens in charge of the prime Markhor habitats.
Hangul is our state animal, as we all know, but Markhor represents the high altitude and the mountains and the rugged terrain. We in the Department of Wildlife Protection attach great significance, great importance to the conservation of this majestic animal. As we all know that by the intervention of the Honorable Supreme Court, Khazinag was declared as a national park. But later on, we in the department have been able to notify Khara Gali as well as Tatakuti as wildlife sanctuaries to give more spaces to this particular animal. We see that the population at present is limited to these landscapes, but if protection measures are in place and the spaces are given, there is a hope that population will grow and it will show an upward inclined trend.
Markhors inhabit steep rocky mountains. They are nimble and swift. But life for the Markhor is not easy when they start their lives on these steep cliffs. In 2017, field biologist Tahir witnessed an extraordinary natural history moment showing how tough life can be for these species.
We traced two Markhor mothers taking their kids to these cliffs, which can be termed as their first cliff walk. The kids were apparently very nervous in the beginning because this was the first schooling they had to go in these cliffs to live their life in these cliffs. The mother was very patient with the timid kid, but after some time, she suddenly threw off the young one off the cliff. The kid was not hurt at all, but after that fall, the fear faded away and the kid walked more confidently on these steep cliffs. The other kid also somehow got confident and moved across smoothly. This entire episode was documented and put in the form of a short movie by the name of Mountain Mothers. This movie was uploaded on the YouTube and has received more than 2 million views so far. This is a small step towards generating awareness about the lesser known species, which is very less known throughout the world and in Kashmir as well.
Conserving the Markhor has not been easy as several threats confront this majestic animal. Riaz talks from his experience working in various Markhor terrains.
Livestock grazing in critical Markhor habitat is a major issue that the Markhor faces. Migratory herders come in huge numbers and camp during the summers in prime Markhor habitats. This creates a major competition for forage in these areas, and very little food is left for the Markhor to survive on during the summers and subsequent harsh winters. WTI has been assisting the Department of Wildlife Protection in regulating the number of grazers in these protected areas. Now, only bona fide grazers who have traditional rights on these lands are permitted. This has reduced the grazing load by around 30%, but more needs to be done in this direction. Development and urbanization in certain areas of the Pir Panjal is yet another cause of concern for us. Potentially damaging activities like construction of highways, for which blasting and debris disposal are challenges, have resulted in major disruption of these Markhor habitats. Due to an increase in unregulated casual tourism, people have now even opened roadside shops inside these fragile areas.
Poaching for meat has remained a major worry for Riaz and WTI teams. We got to interact with one of the locals who has witnessed Markhor poaching over the years, but now works with Riaz and provides him the necessary ground intelligence.
Markhor is an extremely agile and sharp animal, and hunting them was never easy. They have a great sense, and getting a Markhor down required skill as well as effort. Markhor hunting for meat was prominent, but now that is a thing of past. And we know that the animal needs protection, and we have been working actively with the Forest Department and the team of Wildlife Trust of India to share our field knowledge around Markhor and the modus operandi of the hunters.
Poaching, which has come down to a large extent, but still there are some reports from the other side of the Pir Panjal, the Rajouri Poonch area, which has although recently been notified as a sanctuary, but still there are some instances of poaching, and the pressures are also felt in this side of the Pir Panjal. We have been doing constant surveillance of the area, and we have been doing patrolling of the area of the hotspots, and for this particularly in winter season we go up in the vulnerable areas and try to curtail this menace. And another thing we do is the profiling of the traditional hunters. We have done that, and we have got a database regarding the arms and ammunitions possessed by these erstwhile hunters, and got them registered with the police and the wildlife department.
On the other side of the line of control, the Markhor is the national animal of Pakistan. However, Pakistan allows trophy hunting as a conservation practice for the benefit of local communities. But Riaz questions this practice. Is sport hunting to earn foreign exchange an effective medium of wildlife conservation and tourism?
Trophy hunting, as practiced on the other side of the border, is one of the most ridiculous form of conservation. Especially if I talk about the Markhor, which lives a tough life and faces some extreme challenges. I fail to understand what pleasures do these hunters get by killing such vulnerable animals. In India, we believe in working proactively with the key stakeholders, which are the communities. Involving communities to formulate effective ecotourism models, and such models have scripted major success stories in other places of the Himalayas where tourism has flourished around species like snow leopards, red pandas, bears, etc. Shoot the Himalayan wildlife, but using your camera and not your guns, and communities will benefit automatically. This will be one of the key highlights of Markhor conservation in India in years to come.
Community participation is an integral part of any successful conservation project. Sociologist and field officer Sameer Khazir has been working tirelessly at the grassroots level to ensure that Markhor habitats are protected in Kashmir. Sameer also listens to grievances of herders who coexist with the Markhor. He shares his insights and the challenges he faces on the field.
The involvement of the local communities in wildlife and habitat conservation, is a necessary precondition when it comes to scripting any conservation story in any part of the world. Markhor and its conservation are not different. In most of the Markhor habitats, be it Kazirangad National Park or the Hirpura Wildlife Sanctuary, we work proactively with the migratory herders, the Gujjar, Bakarwal and the Chopan community, as well as the sedentary local communities. Since they are predominantly dependent on the Markhor habitat and hence are its primary stakeholders. 94% of these communities use fuel wood as the major source of energy for cooking, with 90% of it being extracted from the protected areas. Therefore, this necessitated the need to support these communities for alternative source of fuel wood. We have been in the process of exploring and converging the various conservation developmental linkages, and here we tapped on the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, where 700 Pulse LPG cylinders were distributed among the women in these remotest areas, which were actually the critical Markhor areas, so as to reduce the fuel wood dependency on the protected areas. And one of the positive impact of this initiative is that the safety and the security of the women has been addressed. These women earlier, they used to inadvertently come into conflict with the wild animals in the process of fetching the fuel wood. In our project approach, we have metamorphosed this into their SAGs, the self-help groups, which we have formed under the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which we popularly called as Ummeed in Jammu and Kashmir. Under this community-owned and community-driven program, these women attend the regular meetings, these women attend the weekly meetings and try to bring to resolution their social grievances and even vent out their suppressed feelings, besides providing them the diverse opportunities for their livelihood.
Sameer is also concerned about the issues of migratory herders seeping into the prime Markhor habitats. Hirpura Wildlife Sanctuary, which is a vital Markhor habitat, is also home to nearly 500 migratory herder households. They are dispersed in 40-odd grazing pastures. So traditionally, these grazers migrate seasonally, spending summers in the alpine meadows of Kashmir and winters in the foothills of Rajouri Punj. Over the years, an alarming trend has been witnessed where 70% of the herders have started letting their pastures on rent to unauthorized herders to earn more cash. An effective conservation plan would involve working closely with the herders to find a solution to this problem. Sameer explains this approach at length.
Livestock rearing is also a livelihood option for these migratory herders. So, putting a complete restriction on the livestock rearing is neither judicious nor it is easy. It's not about abolishing herding as a practice. It's about managing the social, ethical, political dimensions of this age-old tradition and culture.
The Markhor faces complicated threats, which are difficult to resolve for the department staff as well as the Wildlife Trust of India team. Being the world's largest goat and roaming in one of the most militarized borders, we try to understand some of the challenges faced by the team working at the LOC.
You know, in our project, we always have a collaboration with the Department of Wildlife Protection, Jammu and Kashmir, and Army is the main stakeholder. Most of the times when we leave our homes and go on the field, we face a number of restrictions and challenges. One of the challenge remains not being able to visit some critical habitats which we have to visit, being an official assignment. We do understand the limitations of the Army. These restrictions might be out of the genuine security concerns, and we always cooperate with them as the responsible citizens of the nation.
The constant efforts of the Wildlife Department and the WTI has resulted in generating scientific knowledge about the Markhor, creating awareness about the needs of the Markhor. Concerns, however, persist.
We have spent nearly 15 years on Markhor conservation, but we cannot afford to stop here. Despite of some of the best efforts of the Wildlife Department and with the help of NGOs, Markhor may disappear from certain areas of Kashmir if preventive actions are not enforced collectively by the government, Wildlife Department, NGOs, communities. Everyone will have to join hands.
It is said that animals know no boundaries. But here at the line of control, there is a very visible fence that stops the Markhor from moving between India and Pakistan. If the two countries join hands and have a bilateral dialogue, there can be a conservation plan in place, a transboundary conservation plan that protects this magnificent icon of the Pir Panjal Mountains.
The Markhor survives in tough conditions and has survived through rough and tough times. But will India be able to conserve Pakistan's national animal? If all stakeholders continue to rally their support, these towering horns will continue to dazzle the valleys of Kashmir.